Sir, before I come to the main provisions of the bill, I would like to explain briefly the need for bringing in this measure. As it is known, the State Financial Corporations Act was passed in 1950 in order to enable the states to establish state financial corporations with the object of providing long-term credit to small and medium-scale industries. 3 years before that act was passed, the Industrial Finance Corporation Act was passed in 1940 in order to make medium and long-term credit more readily available to industrial concerns, particularly in circumstances where the normal banking facilities were not available to them. The Industrial Finance Corporation, during the first 3 years of its life, had made some progress in achieving these objectives and had acquired a certain amount of experience. Full use of the experience acquired by the Industrial Finance Corporation during the 3 years of its life was made a drafting the State Financial Corporations Act 1950. The jurisdictions of these two corporations were not overlapping because the Industrial Finance Corporation afforded the necessary credit facilities to industrial concerns of a comparatively large size. It could not possibly provide the same facilities to smaller concerns located throughout India to meet the regional demands, and therefore there was a demand from various states for the establishment of such institutions which may cater to the needs of the various states. So, under Section 26 of the State Financial Corporations Act, such corporations cannot grant accommodation to a single industrial concern for an amount exceeding 10% of the paid-up capital, which may not exceed a maximum limit of Rs 10 lakhs, whereas Industrial Finance Corporation does not deal with applications for loans less than Rs 10 lakhs unless the loan application is from a state where the State Financial Corporation does not exist. So the House will appreciate that the state finance corporations have a very important role in to play in the growth of small and medium scale industries. The second 5-year plan lays considerable emphasis on basic and heavy industries, but the growth of small and medium scale industries also finds an important place in the plan and in the country's economy. It is therefore necessary that the state financial corporations should be able to meet the requirements of the small-scale industries. With this view, last year, the House will remember the State Financial Corporations Act 1950 was amended in order to make newly formed industrial concerns eligible for loans from the state financial corporations. Before the amendment was passed, the State Financial Corporation could only make loans to existing concerns and the industrial concerns which were, so to say, in the offing could get no financial help from the State Financial Corporation. It was thought, in view of the impact of industrialization and greater emphasis laid on the development of small and medium scale industries, that the whole working of the state financial corporations, which were important corporate institutions catering to the needs of such industries, should be reviewed. It was felt that the activities of these corporations were not expanding or were not adequately meeting the requirements of the small and medium scale industries due to certain structural defects or due to certain anomalies that were creeping in. Therefore, the Reserve Bank took the initiative of calling a conference of the representatives of the state financial corporations, and two such conferences were held in August 1950 and November 1960. These conferences recommended certain amendments to the Act. These were very carefully considered, and a draft bill was circulated to the various states. A number of states took very keen interest in the working of these corporations and made very useful suggestions, and the present bill incorporates some of the important recommendations of those conferences as well as the useful recommendations made by the various states. With this background, I would like to take the House to the important provisions of the bill, and I would briefly explain them. Clause 2 of the bill defines the industrial concern as given in the Principal Act. The Principal Act limits the scope of the activities of the corporation to only such concerns as are engaged or are to be engaged in the manufacture, preservation, or processing of goods, or in mining, or in the generation or distribution of electricity, of any other form of power. In the absence of any clear definition of the phrase processing of goods, the corporations were finding it somewhat difficult to decide whether a particular concern fulfilled the necessary conditions to make them eligible for assistance by the corporation. An explanation under clause 2, subclause 2 is now being added defining the expression processing of goods. This explanation will remove the difficulties of the state financial corporations. Then clause 24 of the bill enables certain states to get the benefit of such corporations.
Sir, this is for the time being the last of the bills with which Parliament has to deal so far as the reorganization of states is concerned. The House has already passed the States Reorganization Bill and also the West Bengal Bihar Transfer of Territories Bills. Certain amendments were made and certain provisions were included in these two bills insofar as they bore on Articles 3 and 4 of the Constitution. As the House is aware, those provisions which are consequential or incidental could be included in those two acts, but there were some provisions which had to be provided for in the Constitution itself. Such provisions have been included in this Constitution 7th Amendment Bill. Now advantage is also taken to incorporate certain other changes or amendments in the Constitution because it was considered that they too would have a very great bearing on the administration not only in the reconstituted states but in other states as well. And therefore we are now dealing with the Constitution 7th Amendment Bill as it has been passed by the Lok Sabha. Certain changes were effected therein after this matter had been considered by the Joint Select Committee, and now I shall very briefly point out to this House the broad features of the bill as it has emerged from the Lok Sabha. So far as representation in the House of the People, in the Council of States or the Rajya Sabha, and also in the state assemblies is concerned, due provision has been made. So far as the Rajya Sabha is concerned, the figure was fixed at 220 as we will be found from the bill. So far as the Lok Sabha is concerned, therein we have got direct representation under adult franchisee, and 500 have been fixed as the maximum number so far as representation from all these states are concerned. And then ordinarily it was considered that 25 ought to be the number for representation in the Lok Sabha of elected members from what are known as the Union Territories. It was considered that the number 25 may not be necessary even if certain further political changes also were to be take place, and therefore it was considered that 20 would be a fairly adequate number so far as the present Union Territories as also other areas that are likely to come to India are concerned. In this connection, I should like to point out to this House that under the Constitution, as it was promulgated, we had a classification or category of states known as Part A, Part B, Part C and Part D, also so far as the Andaman and Nicobar Islands were concerned. And naturally, on account of this particular gradation, the rights as also the functions of the various states and the legislatures therein have differed to a considerable extent. Now, it was considered that the time had come when this classification ought to disappear. In 1947-48, as the House is aware, we had the integration of states, and all these states, either singly or in groups, were brought under the category of Part B states. Part C states were such where it was considered that There ought to be a more direct relation in the sense that they ought to be under the superintendence and control of the President on account of a variety of reasons. The case of Andaman and Nicobar Islands was one by itself. After the administration extending over 7 or 8 years, it is now considered that this classification ought to go, and therefore the States Reorganization Commission also recommended the dissolution of this distinction. Therefore, from now onwards, we shall have states of one category, and there would be 14 states. These states are composed of the former Part A and Part B states and also portion of Part C states so far as they have been merged in the other states. Therefore, under the present category, we shall have only the states and the union territories. So far as the union territories are concerned, there will be 3 further categories of territories according to the way in which they have been treated. We shall have, for example, Delhi as a union territory by itself, and certain special provisions have been made, and as I shall be elaborating soon so far as the administration of Delhi is concerned. Then we have got Himachal Pradesh. Then we have Manipur and Tripura. So these 4 are union territories by themselves. In addition to them, we shall have 2 further classes of territories. Therefore, so far as these 3 categories of territories are concerned, certain provisions have been made in the present Constitution, 7th Amendment Bill. But I would point out to this House that some further legislation in this respect will have to be brought before the House, because it is necessary that a lasting arrangement will have to be made in the near future so far as these 2 categories of states are concerned.